Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim, Chapter 17, A Lesson in Reading. Of course, Justin did not escape that day, not even that year. When Julie, put a glove on and went to pick him up, he submitted meekly enough, and in a short time he was back in his cage. Yet he had learned some things. He had, as Julie noticed, examined the air ducts. The openings along the wall through which warm air flowed in the winter, cool air in the summer. And he had studied the windows. Mainly he had learned that he could, occasionally at least, jump from his cage and wander around without incurring any anger or injury. All of this eventually was important, for it was Justin, along with Jenner, who finally figured out how to get out. I had a part in it too, but all that came later. I won't go into details about the rest of our training, except for one part that was the most useful of all, but in general, during the months that followed, two things were happening. First, we were learning more than any other rats ever had before. And we were becoming more intelligent than any rats had ever been. The second thing could be considered, from some points of view, even more important and certainly more astonishing. Dr. Schultz, you will recall, had said that the new series of injections might increase our lifespan double or more. Yet, even he was not prepared for what happened. Perhaps it was the odd combination of both types of injections working together. I don't know, and neither did he. But the result was that as far as he could detect, in the A group, the aging process seemed to stop almost completely. For example, during the years that we were in the laboratory, most of the rats in the control group grew old and sickly and finally died. So did those in the B group. For though they were getting the injections too, the formula was not the same as ours. But among the 20 of us in A group, no one could see any signs that we were growing older at all. Apparently, though we seldom saw them, the same thing was happening with the G group, the mice, who were getting the same injections that we were. Dr. Schultz was greatly excited about this. The short lifespan has always been a prime limiting factor in education, he told George and Julie. If we can double it and speed up the learning process at the same time, the possibilities are enormous. Double it. Even now, years later, after the injections were stopped, we seem hardly any older than we were then. We could not detect either of these things ourselves. That is, we didn't feel any different. And since we had no contact with the other groups, we had no basis for comparison. All we had to do was go by what Dr. Schultz said. He and the others were preparing a research paper about us to be published in a scientific journal. So each morning he dictated the results of the previous day's test into a tape recorder. We heard all of it. Though there was a lot of technical stuff we couldn't understand, especially at first. Until the paper was published, he kept reminding George and Julie of this. The whole experiment was to be kept a secret. The one important phase of training began one day after weeks of really hard work with shape recognition that I mentioned before. But this time it was different. For the first time, they used sounds along with the shapes. Real pictures we could recognize. For example, one of the first and simplest exercises was a picture. For example, a clear photograph of a rat. I suppose they felt sure we would know what that was. This picture was shown on a screen with a light behind it. Then after I looked at the picture and recognized it, a shape flashed on the screen under it. Sort of a half circle and two straight lines, not like anything I had ever seen before. Then the voice began, R, R, R. It was Julie's voice, speaking very clearly. After repeating R a dozen times or so, that particular shape disappeared and another one came on the screen, still under the picture of the rat, and it was a triangle with legs on it. And Julie's voice began again. A. When that shape disappeared, a third shape came on the screen, and this one was a cross. And Julie's voice said, T. And then all three shapes appeared at once, and a recorded voice said, R, A, T, rat. You will already have recognized what was going on here. They were teaching us to read. The symbols under the picture were the letters R, A, T. But the idea did not become clear to me, nor to any of us, for quite a long time, because of course, we didn't know what reading was. Oh, we learned to recognize shapes easily enough. When I saw the rat picture, I knew straight away what the symbols would appear beneath it would be. In the same way, when the picture showed a cat, I knew what the shapes that would appear beneath it would be. The half circle with Julie's voice saying, C, C, C. I even learned that when a photograph showed not one but several rats, a fourth letter would appear under it, a snaky line, and Julie would say S, S, S. But as to what all this was for, none of us had an inkling. It was Jenner who finally figured it out. By this time, we had developed sort of a system of communication, a simple enough thing, just a passing of spoken messages from one cage to the next, like passing notes in school. Justin, who was still next to me, called to me one day. Message for Nicodemus from Jenner. He says it's very important. All right, I said. What's the message? Look at the shapes on the wall next to the door. He says to look carefully. My cage, like Jenner's and the rest of those in A group, was close enough to the door so that I could see what he meant. Near the doorway, there was a large square piece of white cardboard fastened to the wall, a sign. It was covered with an assortment of black markings, which I had never paid any attention to before, though they had been there since we had arrived. Now, for the first time, I looked at them carefully and I grasped what Jenner had discovered. The top line of the black marks on the wall were instantly familiar. R, A, T, S. As soon as I saw them, I thought of the picture that went with them, and I knew for the first time I was reading. Because, of course, that's what reading is, using symbols to suggest a picture of an idea. From time to time, from that time on, it gradually became clear to me what all the lessons were for. And once I understood the idea, I was eager to learn more. I could scarcely wait for the next lesson and for the next. The whole concept of reading was, to me at least, fascinating. I remember how proud I was when months later I was able to read and understand that whole sign. I read it hundreds of times. I'll never forget it. Rats may not be removed from the laboratory without written permission. And at the bottom, in small letters, the word NIM. But then a puzzling thing came up, and we're still not even sure about it. Apparently, Dr. Schultz, who was running the lessons, did not realize how well they were succeeding. He continued the training, the new words, and the new pictures every day. But the fact is, once we had grasped the idea and learned the different sounds of each letter, we were all way ahead of him. He was teaching us certain words and letters. I remember well during one of the lessons looking at a picture of a tree. Under it, the letters flashed T, R, E, E. But in the photograph, through the tree was in the foreground, there was a building, and in the background, there was a sign near it. And I scarcely glanced at TREE, but concentrated instead on reading the sign behind it, which said, NIM, private parking, by permit only, reserved for doctors and staff, no visitor parking. The building behind it, tall and white, looked very much like the building we were in. I'm sure Dr. Schultz had plans for testing our reading ability. I could even guess from the words he was teaching us what the tests were going to be like. For example, he taught us left, right, door, food, open, and so on. It was not hard to imagine the test. I'd be placed in one chamber, my food on another. There would be 2 doors and a sign saying, for food, open the door at the right, or something like that. Then, if I or if all of us moved unerringly toward the proper door, he would know that we could read the sign. As I said, I'm sure he planned on doing this, but apparently he did not think we were ready for it yet. I think maybe he was even a little afraid to try, because if he did it too soon, or if for any other reason it did not work, his experiment would be a failure. He wanted to be sure, and his caution was his undoing. Justin announced one evening around the partition, I'm going to get out of my cage tonight and wander around a bit. How can you? It's locked. Yes, but did you notice along the bottom edge there's a printed strip? I had not noticed it. I should perhaps explain that when Dr. Schultz and the others opened our cages, we could never see quite how they did it. They manipulated something under the plastic floor, something we couldn't see. What does it say? I've been trying to read it for the last 3 times they brought me back from the training. It's very small print, but I think I finally made it out. It says, to release door, pull knob forward and slide right. Knob? Under the floor, about 1 inch black, there's a metal thing just in front of the shelf. I think that's the knob, and I think I can reach it through the wire. Anyway, I'm going to try. Now? Not until they close up. Closing up was a ritual Dr. Schultz, Julie, and George went through each night. For about an hour, they sat at their desks, wrote notes in their books, filed papers in their cabinets, and finally locked the cabinets. Then they checked all the cages, dimmed the lights, locked the doors, and went home, leaving us in the laboratory. About half an hour after they left that night, Justin said, I'm going to try now. I heard a scuffling noise, a click, and a scrape of metal. In a matter of seconds, I saw his door swing open. It was as simple as that when you could read. Wait, I said. What's the matter? If you jump down, you won't be able to get back in. Then they'll know. I thought of that. I'm not going to jump down. I'm going to climb up the outside of the cage. It's easy. I've climbed up the inside 1,000 times. Above these cages, there's another shelf, and it's empty. I'm going to walk along there and see what I can see. I think there's a way to climb down to the floor and up again. Why don't I go with you? My door would open the same way as his. Better not this time, don't you think? If something goes wrong and I can't get back in, they'll say, oh, it's just A9 again. But if 2 of us are found outside, they'll take it seriously. They might put new locks on the cages. He was right. And you can see that already we both had the same idea in mind, that this might be the first step toward escape for all of us.